tried to feel better and walk away with encouragement. Today, I don't think I'm going to do that. Today, I think you're going to walk away a little bit mad. You're going to be a little bit mad, but you're also going to be a lot proud. So we are going to look at glutathione from a completely scientific perspective. Because although science isn't perfect, and certainly the communication of science isn't perfect, it's as close as we can get to revealing what the truth is. So today we're going to talk about glutathione truth, and we're going to look very carefully at how to discern what is real and what is hype, what is fake. Let's start by looking at Immunical. Many of you have seen many presentations on Immunical, so I'm going to cover this very briefly. Just to lay a basis. Immunical is an undenatured whey protein that's been clinically proven to raise glutathione levels. It's not glutathione, but it raises glutathione levels. And it appears in one of these two books. Now again, I'm talking from a North American perspective. In North America, we have these two books, the CPS in Canada and the PDR in the United States. And in those books are all of the medications that a doctor can prescribe to a patient. And one of these two books will sit on the desk of every single doctor and every single pharmacist in North America. This is one of the most common books in North America, but it sits on your doctor's desk and it sits on your pharmacist's desk. And in there appears Immunical, something that is not a drug, something that is a natural product. But all of these products have undergone tremendous amount of research and requires clinical evidence. Now, when I say clinical evidence, what am I talking about? Studies that are carried out in human beings, what we call randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled studies. Now this sounds like a bunch of long words, but they describe a certain kind of study that every doctor needs to have seen before he or she can responsibly recommend the product to people. And this book, which I am constantly updating, contains almost 100 published studies on Immunical, and probably around 25 or 35 human studies, many of them that reach this gold standard, the highest standard of research that says that this product works. How do you find this research? This is a website that is made available to the whole world. The whole world uses this. It's put out by the National Institutes of Health in the United States. And it's called PubMed. Who of you out here have used PubMed? So many of you. Why do people go to PubMed? I'm on PubMed every day. Any researcher, any scientist, any doctor that wants to get a hold of original studies will find them on PubMed. Now, most of you don't go on PubMed because it's very difficult to read. It's highly entrenched in medical and scientific words. Most of you read opinion articles or reviews coming from people who have read the research. You're not reading the real research. You're reading somebody's opinion on the research. If you want the real research, you go to PubMed. Researchers are on PubMed all the time. So let's go through an exercise. Let's go to PubMed. And on PubMed, you enter a keyword. In this case, the keyword is glutathione. And you see over 200,000 articles that come back from PubMed. It sounds like a big number. Let me put it into context. If you looked up vitamin C, you might find 70,000 articles. If you looked up vitamin E, you might find 40,000 articles. There are more articles written mentioning glutathione than vitamin C and vitamin E put together. Just to put that into perspective. But 200,000 articles, my God, I would still be reading them all. So PubMed allows you to put filters on there. So see, here you see the page that allows you to filter these articles. Let's apply a filter to it. So I applied randomized controlled trial. So this is going to be a more specific look at what glutathione does when you test it against a placebo, or test it against another product. So this is really refining down the search. Let's add another filter to it. Human studies, because after all, it's human studies that count. Test tube studies are interesting, animal studies are interesting, but what really counts are human studies. When you take 95% of studies that are done in animals that look promising, 95% of animal studies never make it past human studies. Because translating it into humans, you find out things you never expected. So now look at the results. We went from over 200,000 all the way down to 2,000 articles. And it's these articles that count when we make a decision about what works in humans and what doesn't work. So let's get back on topic. The question we asked today is, how do I raise glutathione levels in the human body? And you would think that there'd be a simple answer, but it's much more complex. Let's look at some of the most popular ways: the oral glutathione, liposomal glutathione, cysteine, cysteine. Note the difference in spelling, N-acetylcysteine, and of course, other things that you're going to find on the market. Let's start with eating glutathione. This would be the instinctual choice to make. It sounds like it makes sense. You want to raise glutathione levels in your body. Let's eat glutathione. And there are hundreds of products out there that contain glutathione. Can you eat glutathione? the biggest myth out there. You cannot eat glutathione and expect it to raise glutathione levels in your body. When you eat glutathione, it becomes rapidly broken down in your digestive tract, and very little, if any, actually make it to your cells. But this is still the most common way that people use to eat, to try to raise glutathione levels. Is this a medically accepted way? No, because there are hundreds, maybe thousands of articles that tell you that eating glutathione is an inefficient way of raising glutathione levels. Glutathione is made inside of your cell. Your cells are little glutathione manufacturing plants. So glutathione is made by the cell, and the way that the cell makes glutathione is that it requires the building blocks or specific nutrients so that the cell can make its own glutathione. We call these specific nutrients precursors. This is the most important message I have for you today. If you want to go to sleep now, you can. But I have some more interesting stuff for you to see. So remember, there are hundreds of articles that show that oral glutathione is not effective, and this is so well established in the literature. And these are just some of the articles that you can look up that will clearly tell you that. But wait! Many people will pull out this study to show that oral glutathione does in fact raise body levels of glutathione. This was published in 2015, so I guess that's over 10 years old. This is one study that people will always show you, here's a study that shows that oral glutathione works. It was a 6-month study done in 54 adults. So let's just take a closer look at this study. And what I've done is I've translated it into Spanish for you to understand it. You see it? Yeah. It was published in the European Journal of Nutrition. Take note of that. And take note of the lead author, one John P. Ritchie Jr. And you'll see why this is important in a minute. John Ritchie Jr. Another thing to pay attention to, you see, reading a research article it's a skill. When I was teaching medical residents and students, I would have to teach them how to read an article. There are many things you need to look at. And one thing to pay attention to is that the study was funded by the largest manufacturer of glutathione supplements. You see, you have to state this in your study, where you get your funding from. Kaiowahako Bio Company in Japan. They make a very popular brand called Cetria glutathione. I'm not saying that this necessarily influences the outcome of the study, but it does remain suspect. And this study, out of the 200,000 articles on glutathione, is probably one of the only papers that show that oral glutathione works. And of course, it was roundly criticized by most of the medical and scientific community. But people still refer to it, unfortunately. Now, what about liposomal glutathione. This has made a huge splash in the glutathione world by coating glutathione in a fatty layer. It's supposed to protect it from being broken down in the digestive tract, and it's supposed to get effectively absorbed, and it's being treated as a breakthrough in glutathione delivery. And there are literally hundreds of companies that are marketing this. And marketing this, not teaching about it, using influencers, using marketing tools, and this has become a huge success. Even among medical professionals, unfortunately. This is all great, but does it work? Where is the evidence? So there's another paper, another single paper that everybody uses that's so-called proof. This is a 2018 article. Again, let me translate it into Spanish for easier understanding. Oral supplementation with liposomal glutathione elevates body stores of glutathione and markers of immune function. Sounds impressive. So, please note that it was published in the same article as the paper on oral glutathione. Okay, the same paper published it. Same paper that published an oral glutathione paper that everybody has a problem with. Now that's not bad in itself. Who's the main author? The same John P. Ritchie Jr., the same guy that wrote the article that oral glutathione works. A little bit suspicious, no? And furthermore, the study was funded by yet another maker of glutathione, in this case, the maker of a liposomal glutathione, a company called Research Nutritionals, and they make something called Trifortify liposomal glutathione. But let's assume all that is acceptable. Let's take a closer look at this study. It was a 1-month pilot study. 1 month. 1 month. They used 2 separate doses of liposomal glutathione, and there were 6 subjects per group. 6 people per group. Not 16, not 60, not 600, 6 people. How do you even measure statistical relevance using 6 people? And curiously, what they found was the group taking the lower dose of glutathione, of liposomal glutathione, actually had a greater increase in glutathione levels. Does that make any sense? Could that just be because you're only looking at 6 people? Wouldn't you have liked to see a placebo group? Are you kidding me? No placebo group. Not double-blinded, not placebo-controlled, 6 subjects per group, and this is the one paper that people are waving around, showing that liposomal glutathione works. I'm sorry. Okay, let's move move on to intravenous glutathione. This is where glutathione is injected directly into your bloodstream. This is becoming increasingly popular and offered by many clinics. Well, intravenous glutathione does work, and it's undergone enough studies. Of course, there's problems with intravenous glutathione. Every injection carries the risk of an infection, and it requires traveling to a clinic and the inconveniences associated with that. But there's something else that is important for you to know about. There's something that pharmacists call a half-life. It's a measurement of how long the substance lasts in your body and how long it takes for half of it to be gone. So clearly, it's a reflection of how long the substance works. In this case, I want to show you a study. Researchers injected a high dose of glutathione into human subjects, and they looked at what's called pharmacokinetics, which includes measuring the half-life of the glutathione. "14 minutes. In this study, doctors used a smaller dose of glutathione. What did it show? Smaller dose. 1.6 minutes. This is an intravenous product available for clinics for their use. This is what many injectors use. What's the reported half-life? A little bit better. 10 minutes. Let's look at a real example. I have a video for you. I hope this works. Let's see. Here we go. Here's a video of a patient being wheeled into the doctor's office. He has Parkinson's disease. He was wheelchair bound, and when he tried to walk, this was a typical walk that you see in Parkinson's. Now the man receives intravenous glutathione. Look at him. A few minutes later, he gets out of the chair and walks normally down the hall. Isn't this wonderful? Isn't this wonderful? The problem is, and we saw the half-life of intravenous glutathione, by the time this guy gets back at home, he's back to the way he was previously. You understand that? So intravenous glutathione, that's okay if you want to have a quick detox or you drank too much the night before. It will work. It will work. What about glutathione patches? There's an increasing number of patches being marketed now. Do they work? Where is the science? Some of them don't even have glutathione in them. This patch here doesn't contain glutathione. They're supposed to work by improving organ function through light reflection. What? Yeah, through reflecting light and somehow raising glutathione levels in your body. There's not a single study that has confirmed that this works. No study that actually measures glutathione after the use of this patch. Ay, ay, ay. This glutathione patch claims things like immune support, brain function boost, increased energy. Any proof? Not a single study. Here's one that claims gentle on the stomach. Well, that's hard to argue with. It's a patch. You can even find glutathione patches on AliExpress. It just shows up everywhere. So here's the bottom line on glutathione skin patches. The skin is a strong, tough barrier. It's really hard to get a substance to go through the skin and have any impact on blood levels. If any of these patches do actually have an effect, it will be on the skin immediately underneath the patch. Let's look at inhaled glutathione. This is glutathione that's given through an inhaler, through something called a nebulizer. Does that work in Spanish? This is a device that many of you have seen. Some of you may have even used. It's very commonly used in conditions like asthma or COPD. And here's an article published in the Journal of Cystic Fibrosis. It was a placebo-controlled study and actually showed that inhaled glutathione works. Here's a study done in asthmatic patients. Again, some successful improvement. And there are other studies available as well. So yes, the answer is yes, inhaled glutathione delivered through a nebulizer works. It's not something that's done commonly. And not everybody is going to have the equipment or the opportunity to do this. Let's move on to glutathione mouthwashes. Here's an example. It's described as a liquid supplement blending nanoglutathione, L-cysteine, curcumin, and vitamin C, and using a proprietary hydrostat or nanomicrofusion encapsulation. What? According to the manufacturer, this allows for rapid glutathione absorption. If this sounds more like marketing double talk, it is. Those words, I don't even know if they're scientific, they mean nothing to me. And there's absolutely no evidence that this product works. No research, no human studies, nothing. And if you read scientific reviews on this, everybody agrees this is absolute nonsense. Nonsense. So glutathione mouthwashes, buyer beware, is something sounds scientific. It doesn't mean that it is, and I would always ask somebody who knows science to read it for you. Okay, so now we're going to get into a few basic things before we go on. When we look at the structure of the glutathione molecule, we see that it's something called a tripeptide. This just means that there's 3 amino acids: glutamate, cysteine, and glycine. We need to obtain these from our nutrition, from our diet. And looking closer at glutamate and glycine, these are actually quite common in the foods that you ate. I'm sure if you had breakfast this morning, if you had the time to have breakfast, you had a lot of glycine and glutamate, even if you ate at McDonald's. Cysteine, on the other hand, is much rarer in our diet and more difficult to obtain. It's much more uncommon to have cysteine in your diet. And not only is it hard to get cysteine from your regular nutrition, it's considered the limiting factor for the manufacture of glutathione. So your ability to make glutathione is limited by your ability to get cysteine. And not only is cysteine rare, but it's only a particular kind of cysteine that is biologically available. So now let's look at another amino acid called cysteine. Again, note the difference in spelling and pronunciation. Cysteine is 2 cysteine molecules linked together by what we call a disulfide bond. It makes cysteine a source of cysteine. a little bit complicated, no? But we'll get through this part quickly. I know that some of you want to see this. So we use the term bonded cysteine in place of cystine. Here we see two molecules, and note that the disulfide bond between the two cysteine to form cystine. Let's go back to understanding whey protein isolate, the one represented by Immunocal. It is undenatured. Undenatured. This is where it gets interesting, and this is where recent knowledge of protein science is coming into common knowledge. Undenatured means that the original three-dimensional shape of the protein is intact, and it appears as it does in nature. You see that this protein is wound up like a ball of wool, and this allows contact between the individual strands of protein to keep its natural shape or configuration. So this allows the disulfide bonds to remain intact. Now the problem with these whey proteins is that in the manufacture and refinement of whey protein, these are extremely sensitive proteins, and they're extremely sensitive to becoming denatured by heat, by mechanical agitation, and other disturbances. And when that denature takes place, it unfolds the protein, so it loses its three-dimensional shape. When you lose the three-dimensional shape of these proteins, you lose their ability to raise glutathione. So whey proteins remain, commercial whey proteins remain an excellent source of nutrition, but have lost their ability to raise glutathione. Here we see an extreme close-up of a strand of this protein, and you see that the bond between the cysteine in an unfolded protein becomes broken. So this is why we call the active ingredient in Immunocal bonded cysteine. Now I know that's a lot for you to see, but I have made a video on explaining what bonded cysteine is. You can access it through my YouTube channel. It's available in Spanish as well, I think. I lose track of these things. So feel free to visit my YouTube page, which you will find many videos on glutathione and Immunocal. It's a YouTube / Dr. Jimmy Gutman, one word. Now, most people wonder, why not just take cysteine supplements to raise glutathione? This is easily available. I mean, it's found everywhere in the market. You'll find it at the natural health food store, and it's being promoted as a glutathione precursor. Has this been shown to be true? In fact, it's not true. Eating cysteine is not an effective way of raising glutathione. Cysteine is very unstable in your digestive system and becomes rapidly oxidized. And when it becomes oxidized, cysteine actually carries a certain toxicity. If you have too much free cysteine, it can serve as a pro-oxidant, which is actually the opposite of what you want to do. And another proof of its inability to raise glutathione is the fact that doctors don't use cysteine. It's a cheap thing to get. You would think doctors would use it. This is why in the 1960s, science invented N-acetylcysteine. So this is where you take cysteine and you put an acetyl chain on it, and this will slow down the oxidation of the cysteine. So about 10 or 20% of the cysteine will actually survive the trip to make it to your cells, which makes it work. What about cysteine? Again, note the spelling. Again, this needs to be addressed. Cysteine itself is poorly absorbed. It just has not been demonstrated to be an effective glutathione precursor, and there are many attempts and many research articles that have looked at that. So just to summarize, cysteine is the amino acid that's needed to form glutathione, but furthermore, it is a specific form of cysteine. For example, if you took Immunicum, which contains bonded cysteine, and you boiled it, after it's boiled, does it raise glutathione? No. But it contains the same amount of cysteine. Do you understand that? It's not the amount of cysteine, it's the form of the cysteine. So what actually works to raise glutathione levels in the human being? What works? We've seen that oral glutathione doesn't work, and glutathione needs to be produced by the cell itself. So we need the precursors. And this is what we find in these medical references. Again, these two books, they sit on the desk of every doctor in North America. I'm going to ask you all, and I'm going to ask Aurelio, that we need to look into whether one of these books exists in Spain, or is it the European Union that has a common book like this? So we need, as our next project, Aurelio, to get Immunicum into that book. And in these North American books, there's only two things that are listed under glutathione precursor: N-acetylcysteine and, of course, Immunicum. N-acetylcysteine is the go-to drug used by doctors worldwide to raise glutathione. It's a remarkably effective and life-saving drug. I use N-acetylcysteine in emergency situations. For example, it's the antidote to a paracetamol poisoning, which is actually, you use the name paracetamol? Yeah. It's a very effective way of killing yourself. If you take a big old bottle of extra strength paracetamol, most of you will die. Maybe I shouldn't have told you that. But the way doctors will keep you alive, if you show up between 24 and 48 hours after an overdose, they give you N-acetylcysteine, which reverses the dramatically ill effects of the N-acetylcysteine. So it's an excellent drug. And finally, Immunicum shows up in these books. And what Immunicum represents is the richest source of natural glutathione precursors on the planet. take a closer look at N-acetylcysteine. It has literally thousands of clinical studies published on it, and it is a choice used by medical practitioners in hospitals, and it's available by prescription and in certain countries as a supplement as well. Now, it has a few problems. Number one, it has what we call a short half-life. Remember we discussed half-life before? Well, the half-life of NAC is about 3 or 4 hours. So in order to keep glutathione levels up during a 24-hour period, you need to take the NAC 3 or 4 times a day. Except taking NAC, there's some very real side effects. So if you felt nausea or you had vomiting or you had stomach cramps after the first dose, you're going to feel 4 times as bad after the 4 dose. But I use it in an emergency situation because I'd rather have a sick patient than a dead patient. Are you supposed to laugh at that? Let's get back to Immunical. Immunical has been around for over 40 years now. And again, many research papers. But let's do a comparison between N-acetylcysteine and the Immunical, which is a whey protein isolate. Okay, this is a very important thing. The slides are going to be a little bit difficult, but I will make this available to you so you can take your time to go through it. Okay. So, which one of these to choose? Well, we pointed out some differences, the difference in half-life, the difference in toxicity. But once again, let's look again at how the cell makes glutathione. So what do? We get some glutamate. Where? Well, Immunical will supply you with glutamate. It's one of the amino acids that you will find. NAC won't. Get some cysteine. Where? Well, clearly, the Immunical will give you cysteine. And not only cysteine, but Immunical will also give you cysteine. Both of these are a source of cysteine. So that's the form we call bonded cysteine. Get that? N-acetylcysteine also provides cysteine. But only about 10 or 20% of it remains unoxidized. The other 80% or 85% of it is oxidized, and this is one of the reasons why NAC has side effects. Okay, so there's a difference there. We get a step that is called gamma-glutamyl-cysteine. I know it's a mouthful, but this intermediary step requires an enzyme to change the glutamate and cysteine into gamma-glutamyl-cysteine. And you need to have this enzyme in order for NAC to work. Your body needs to have an adequate source of dipeptidides in order to do that. But Immunical supplies you directly with gamma-glutamyl-cysteine. Even if you're short in this enzyme, you will get this substance. Now what about glycine? Where do we get glycine from? Immunical gives you glycine. And Then there's another enzyme called glutathione synthase, and finally we get glutathione. Do you see the difference now in the production of glutathione between these two products? N-acetylcysteine gives you some cysteine. Immunical gives you glutamate, gives you cysteine and cysteine, gives you gamma-glutamylcysteine, gives you glycine. It gives you everything that you need. And there's more differences between these two. When you eat Immunical, you're also getting all of your essential amino acids, all of them. NAC provides none of them. So as a source of nutrition, this is so superior. Let's look at some more differences. Both of them raise glutathione levels. This is true. Half-life of NAC is 3 to 4 hours. The half-life of Immunical is measured, in days, even if you could measure it. NAC has side effects. Side effects are extremely rare with Immunical. NAC is an excellent, excellent medication. Immunical is an excellent source of nutrition. So when we talk about excellent nutrition, what are we talking about? We're talking about what we call a BV, or biological value. A biological value is a reflection of how important the protein is to your body. Clearly, not all proteins are the same. You're going to get much more out of a piece of nice, fresh salmon than you will out of a hot dog. And if we look at biological values of different proteins, this is another thing that we forget to mention about glutathione. About Immunical. Immunical, and look at this chart. Immunical has the highest biological value of any edible protein. Immunical, I'll say it again, is the most important protein that you could eat. You can clap. Here's a good question for you. Where does cysteine come from? And when I talk about cysteine, I'm talking about L-cysteine, that you can get at the natural health food store, and I'm talking about N-acetylcysteine. Where does the cysteine come from? Has anybody asked this question? Let's take a look. Is it a natural product? Is it a synthetic product? Let's see. Why am I showing you a Chinese barbershop? Because years ago, that's where we would get cysteine. They would sweep up the hairs from Chinese barbershops and Chinese hairdressers, and that was the source of cysteine. Please. Now, people who are Jewish and people who are halal are forbidden to eat human remains. And whether it's a religious taboo or not, come on, that's a little bit gross, isn't it? So the Chinese didn't want to lose the market for this rather good substance. So they switched to ducks. The Chinese have lots of ducks. So they started using duck feathers as a source of cysteine. Now the Americans, they see a business opportunity, they want to take advantage of it. So the Americans, in the huge chicken industry, started making cysteine out of chicken feathers. Yes, the major source of cysteine we get is from chicken feathers. Is this a natural product?
Yes.
Can you take a chicken feather and squeeze it really hard and the cysteine comes out? No. There's a whole manufacturing process using different chemicals and extraction techniques that you need to get cysteine. So is cysteine a natural product? They call it a natural product. They call it a natural product. It's as natural as the ethanol that you get at the petrol station, which is made out of corn. Okay? What about glutathione? Where does glutathione come from? Is glutathione a natural product? Here's a shocker. Glutathione supplements come from microbes. Yes, microbial growth. Usually they're from certain fungi like yeasts, like Saccharomyces, and even from certain bacteria. We get glutathione from bacteria. But what do we need to do to these yeasts and bacteria? This gets me crazy. Here we see a study where these yeasts have been highly engineered to produce glutathione. In this article, the fungus Saccharomyces cerevisiae has been altered using an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. What it does, it shuffles genes around to produce glutathione. This is really high tech, and this is high tech genetic modification. Here we see a study where they took the same yeast and re-engineered it. Re-engineered the genes in the yeast. This is back from 2013. In another Chinese study, I'm showing, yes, the Chinese manipulated the genes of a bacteria called E. coli. Some of you have heard of this bacteria before, to raise the production of glutathione so it can be harvested. Here, scientists fused the genes of two different bacteria strains, Streptococcus and E. coli. They produced a Frankenstein bug that was able to generate glutathione. So, is this natural? I guess it depends on what your definition is. In either case, natural or not, this is 100% genetically modified organisms. 100%. And when you read the label on a bottle of glutathione pills, it tells you that it's a natural product. And some of it will even say not genetically modified. Absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. So I'm not saying that a genetically modified product is a bad thing, but the glutathione, even we know it doesn't work, is 100% genetically modified. So just in summary, here's a chart that covers many of the ways that glutathione can be raised. I know that it's hard for you to read it, so I will zoom in on it. And what it does, it goes through PubMed to see if there's any research evidence and how strong the research evidence is on these different ways. Let's start by looking at glutathione itself. We looked at oral glutathione, very little evidence, stated by hundreds of research articles. Liposomal glutathione, well, that's a lot of people's favorite. We saw that there's one paper that shows that it works, so no. Intravenous glutathione, yes, it works for a few minutes. Sublingual glutathione, there's a few studies, but not enough substantiation to call it proof. Patches, please don't waste your money. Nebulized glutathione, it works, but you need to be set up to do that. We've looked at glutathione, nasal glutathione, and it's nasal spray. It works in certain instances, but it's hard to get. Let's move on to whey. Well, it depends on the whey. If you're using a truly undenatured form of whey, then it works. N-acetylcysteine. This is the most researched drug to raise glutathione. Absolutely works, but you saw the difference between immunocal and N-acetylcysteine. Dimino acid cysteine doesn't work very well. Cysteine doesn't work very well. Lipoic acid works a little bit. There are many other products that claim to raise glutathione that don't have any substantial research behind them, like Ribosys is one product, Protandim is another product. But in summary, if you look at this chart, there's two things that have been proven medically and accepted by the medical community to raise glutathione, marked in green, and that is N-acetylcysteine and our wonderful product, immunocal. I apologize for giving a little bit of a complicated lecture, and I apologize for being so negative. But the truth had to come out. The truth had to come out, and I don't know how much longer I will be speaking in front of a crowd, but you need to know that you are on the cutting edge of a revolution that is, although we've been around for 40 years, it's really starting right now. And you are here right now. And you have the most remarkable product in your hands. I wish